Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox back for another episode. I'm absolutely thrilled today to have with me Teddy Jones. So, Teddy, first of all, welcome and thank you so much for taking the time to visit with me today.
Thanks for inviting me.
Teddy, could you tell us about your journey from nursing to education to academia into full time fiction?
It's a long one. I'll begin with telling you the fact that I really enjoy going to school. I'm an inveterate student, and so it's not a surprise that I would have gone back to school for further education a number of times during my working years before I began writing fiction full time. I began by winning a contest in that was that was sponsored by the Women's Auxiliary of the Medical Society in Wichita Falls. The winner would win first semester's tuition, room and board, uniforms, the whole routine at Wichita General Hospital School of Nursing. And they had a contest that you would write an essay, what I could offer my community as a professional nurse. Now, picture me 18 years old, not having a clue about what I intended or should be doing whenever I left high school, which I was eager to do. So I thought I can write. And so I'll write an essay. And there was no Future Nurses Club, so there was no local competition in Iowa Park. Mine was sent away to the contest in Wichita Falls, and it so happened I won. And so upon graduation, a few months later, I thought it'd be a good idea to find out if I really might be able to do this. So I went to work. I quit my job at the drugstore and went to work as a nurse's aide the summer after high school graduation and decided I could. I loved that. That was great. Look at all I'm learning already, and I'm not even in school. So, hospital education for nursing, which was a diploma. And so after that, I thought it's clear that if I want to continue doing this, I need more education. And so at a point after working a bit as a registered nurse, I went to school again at Incarnate Word College in San Antonio to receive a bachelor's degree in nursing. And then, of course, they talked about the fact that there was a shortage of nurse faculty, and people had told me that I spoke to people well and could teach and so forth. And so I thought, sure, why not? So I went back to school at the University of Texas System School of Nursing for a master's degree. And then I was a member of the faculty there until I went back to school again. And all this time, I never paid for nursing school because all of these years, and it continues to this day, the fact that there's always a shortage of nurses and frequently a shortage of nurse faculty. And during those times, they also paid stipends or provided what they called nurse traineeships that would support further education for nurses. So I ended up going back into the College of Education at UT Austin for a doctorate because there really was only one nursing school anywhere near around that had a doctoral program in nursing. And besides, if you were going to teach a PhD in education, was a good idea. So I did that, continued working at the University of Texas all that time. And then someone said, "You look like you could be an administrator." And so, why not? And so I had a position there as a vice president of that school for curriculum. And whenever that school was divided into six schools across the UT system, I was recruited to go to Colorado to be an associate dean up there, which I did for 3 years, and then came back to Texas, recruited to begin the nursing school at Texas Tech. And so that's when I had a period of time as the founding dean of the School of Nursing there. So that's the short version of what I was doing before I decided I wanted to write fiction. Now, I did go back to school another time. That was to become a nurse practitioner because after about 10 years of being a dean, I thought I've had enough of that. And I enjoyed teaching, and I always enjoyed with working with students as they worked with patients. I never didn't teach. And it occurred to me that one of the things I had wanted to do at some point in my life was to become a nurse practitioner. They had invented those at Colorado, and I had seen them firsthand there. And I thought, this is something that would really be interesting to do. I think I could do it. So I, for what was provided as a postmaster's certificate, and became a family nurse practitioner. And I combined that with the faculty role and continued working at Texas Tech University Health Sciences Center School of Nursing until I took my retirement in the year 2000. And that the last thing I did there was to help start a clinic in an underserved area that would be staffed by nurse practitioners. At that time, there wasn't anything like that in town, and it was a way of creating a learning situation for the nurse practitioner students in our program. And so I continued that after retirement for one more semester as half time. And then was when my husband and I decided we were having a lot more fun coming out here to the farm where he had grown up and helping out here on the weekends. And so maybe it was time to just pick it up and go. And so all this time, through all those years and all those periods of going back to school, I had been making notes, observations about people, observations about situations, things I wondered that I would never find an answer to at that point because I didn't have time. And so I have all these notes, and I think this may be an opportunity when I should begin thinking about doing that other thing I wanted to do, which was to write fiction, not just to write curriculum materials or grants or all the other things that I had written. And so I had that in my mind when we came out here. After about 3 years, it became clear that it was okay if I didn't try to be the other farmhand. Yeah.
Keep
I
going.
then, excuse me, so that's when I began trying to write something. And I didn't have to spend my whole day outdoors helping my husband as he was relearning all he had learned when he was a young man. And so the first try was based on the learning that I could do by going to conferences and reading in books magazines like Poets and Writer's Digest and things of that sort. I thought maybe I could learn enough from those things if I practiced hard and I could do it. Well, it became clear to me after a while I might need a little more than that. And so I began to attend larger conferences, one of which was at the University of New Mexico's Summer Writers Conference in Taos. And it was there whenever I had taken some work there. And then you had an opportunity to meet with the instructor that your workshop met with. And he said to me something like, I think you might want to consider going into a MFA program if you're really interested in writing fiction. And I said, okay, let me think about that. And I had looked at these publications from the industry that I'd seen mention of them. So the end of that story is that I decided I would go back to school again. And meanwhile, I'm writing stuff, sending it out, doing things like that, and not having a whole lot of luck. Some really nice rejections. And so I had written before I went to school over there the draft of a novel. And I had given myself a limit how many rejections it would take me to decide that that I wasn't going to go anywhere with that. And I can't whenever number 60, I'm counting 60 rejections arrived, I said, okay, this means I really do need to do something more. And so what I thought I'd do is I would use the application available to do-it-yourselfers at that point, which was a long time, 2012, provided by Amazon. Their first self-publishing platform was called Create Space. You could basically use a menu of what services you wanted from them, and the result would be what you wanted, a book. Here it is. So there's the first thing I had published, a novel. I called it a coming of age and middle age story about a woman in Lubbock, Texas, and so nearby. And I felt good about that because I had something in my hand, but I knew that wasn't what I really wanted eventually. And so I went back to school and they taught me a lot of things that I really needed to know. And so that's how I got to decide that I was going to actually be able to call myself a writer because they taught me one big important thing was that all good writing is rewriting. And so revision became a gigantic part of what I do. And that and finding some really trusted colleagues that would tell me the truth and have a continuing workshop with maybe one or six, a few people that you could trust to tell you this is not working, this works, I don't know why you're doing this. And I found those people. And so that's how I came to decide that I would call myself a writer. And bit by bit, I stopped working part time as a nurse practitioner the year that it was going to be necessary for me to work nearly full time in order to keep my certification. You have to have a certain number of hours of work during a 2-year period in order to maintain your certification as a nurse practitioner. And it was either do that and don't do the writing because I couldn't do everything, which is hard to admit, but I couldn't. And so I decided this is it. Go ahead. And so that's how I got to call myself a writer full time. And so
What's the genesis of A Family of Good Women? Where did that story come from?
in 2004, I was reading, everything is source material for me. Okay. I was reading the Texas Electric Co-op magazine. And in that magazine was an article by Joe Hawley about a group of women called the Sanctified Sisters. It was the Women's Commonwealth of Belton, Texas. And I thought, oh my goodness, I never heard of such a thing. These were women who, there was a woman who was the leader of the group who was very religious and who perceived it rightly that there were a number of people, women, and some of their children who were in tremendous need following the return of veterans and or following their widowhood after the Civil War. And so she began taking these women in along with the children if they wanted to bring them. One stipulation was that they had to have been visited by the Holy Spirit. She was a part of what is now called the sanctificationist movement during that period of time. And I thought, this is really something I had no idea. So I pulled it out of the magazine. I still have the original that I ripped out and I put it in a file that I keep, which is Later, is the name of the file, meaning you're doing something else right now, save this, you might use it later. I drug it back out. I think it must have been 2013, 14, somewhere in there. And I thought, okay, it's time to do something with this. And so I delved into material. There had been academic studies of the group. There had been some fiction written about some of the people in the group. There is an archive that it turned out was at UT in the Briscoe Center that was kept as the materials of the actual group. I found that out as I was doing all this reading. And so I thought, okay, I need to do archival research. I got to collect all this information. So it was a real interesting opportunity to learn some things about first how using an archive, all those kinds of things. So I got a little grant from the Elizabeth George Foundation that paid for the assistance of someone who actually knew what they were doing in an archive, an archival assistant. And so that helped me, and I did the travel. And then at that time, I had already decided probably I wasn't going to try to redo their story, those original women. That's been done. That had been done by the woman who did the academic work and several others. So I thought, what if, which is the fiction writer's main question, what if 2 generations later, from the group of women that I had met by reading about Mrs. McWhirter and her group, what if those people begin to peel off? These are the daughters of the women who went in there, and what happens to them? And so I found in my mind a character who was one of those people who was the daughter of a daughter, and she was now placed in a situation in my mind of having to decide what she was going to do with herself. She'd graduated from the normal college up at Denton when she had a teaching certificate to teach history, but her mother had just died. And so that's where it came from, and that's where the story grew from. I found a character, I made her up, but it was based on this historical group, which is rich in information. I just didn't want to redo them because they'd been done, and besides which, I write fiction. And so that's what I wanted to do. Did that answer your question?
So I'm always intrigued by writers and their writing process. So for instance, I'm a morning person. If it ain't done by 10 a.m., it ain't gonna get done. Are you a morning person, evening person? Do you write when the spirit moves you? Does the muse enter your soul and it just all comes out? What is Teddy's process?
Hmm. First of all, I'm not sure that I don't tend to be routine. I don't sit still well. And so I can't say that I sit down and I write 5 hours at a time every morning like some writers do. And I admire that. Good for them. But I can't do that. I know that and so I write basically in a project style. I have a notion that this is going to be a big story. Okay. So it means it's not a short story, it's going to be a novel. And so then I have to begin making notes. And so the note making and the reading that's at the base of it has to come before I actually begin trying to make sentences of things. I have all these notebooks of things that I must make certain I want to include or not once the actual composing begins. And so it's not nearly as orderly as it might be for someone who behaves differently than I do, but that's my process. And I'd have to say there are times when I don't write for maybe 2 or 3 days at a time or even more, but I'm thinking about it all the time. And I'm thinking while I'm doing other things. And even when I'm actually composing, I get up and walk around. I have to do that because I hear the way the most important thing to me is that my characters seem real. And in order for them to seem real, I have to hear them talk. I have to know where they are. I have to see them. And that is what I do while I'm walking around. And so I might look like I'm doing laundry, but half of me is thinking about how does she sound when she says that? Or what is she thinking? Or what's the weather like outside today, there where she is? And so that's kind of a messy process, but that's mine. Then
Uh,
after all that, once I have a draft, eventually I take it to my workshop group. I have a group that we meet. There's a core group of us of about six, and we import our teacher who we learned from back when UNM had their workshop. And so every year I have something I'm working toward that gives me an end point to have a good draft. I know it's not finished because everybody will tell me what's wrong or right, and then I'll redo it and may start all over. But that's how it goes for me. But at least I know that next year in July, I need to have this ready so that and I know that I can submit up to 300 pages because it's a small group. That's the parameters I work within. But other than that, it's just the way I work. Does that answer your question?
it does. That's actually how Agatha Christie wrote.
Is that right?
It is.
Oh,
Uh,
really?
she said everything came together in front of the sink washing dishes for her. How did you take the story and the time of the story and make it relevant to a reader in 2025?
That's really important to me is that the notion that why bother? Why bother? Why would somebody bother to read this? But we are all more alike than otherwise. We are all human. And so there are common themes that could be said to be universal over time. Need for family, need for love, need the wish for a sense of competence, safety, all of those things are always available as need to almost anyone. What you focus on, or what I focus on, is what seems uppermost for that particular character. But then all the rest, they are human. And so they have to, all this other has to weave in. You just don't want to make it single point. I mean, you don't want to have, and that's what was wrong with Half White. There was like one major point. I don't now begin with a major point. I want to see what these people are doing. And so I put them in a place. Place is important to me. It has to be as much as a character, place is. And so place affects people, and they're there for a reason. And so I have to sit with them and find out what they're doing and why. And then it begins to come together, which things I need to emphasize. What are they doing and why are they doing it? I'm asking myself. And so those things are relevant now as they were in 1920, 29. For example, in this family of good women, those women eventually wanted to be able to feel competent to handle life themselves. They wanted to. Imogene wanted to be able to find out more about her family once she kind of settled down from having made that move. She wanted to eventually have a notion of, was she going to make use of the education she had, or was she going to continue doing what she did? Success was important to her. Success is important to people now. And so I think that is the way I approach it. And I think that's what I think most people who write fiction aim to have something that's going to be relevant more than to these specific characters. Maybe not people who do time travel, although I've read some time travel things and I think, well, it makes sense now. That's
Could you tell me about your professional journey with Stoney Creek Publishing? How did that come about, and how was that experience for you?
I'm fortunate. I consider myself to be very fortunate to have found them. I was remember telling you about this process where you revise and revise. Okay, a family of good women had more than one name, and it had been revised and sent out by an agent, and then revised again and sent out by an agent, and lovely, kind rejections. And this agent happens to work mainly with submissions to larger national scope houses. And it dawned on me that she was going to be disappointed continually by the fact that I really wasn't aiming I don't write for what's popular. I write for what I want to tell. And so I'm not going to be saying, oh, everybody has a title now that says somebody's daughter or something, that kind of thing. What's trendy is not really, it won't, by the time I get it written, it won't be on trend for now. And so I'm not going to worry about that. And so it occurred to me, and the arrangement with her was that you don't have a contract with me until I sell something. And so I finally said to her about about the manuscript. I've revised it. And I think that I'm going to need to just take it back. And so here I was, manuscript in my hand, free to search for somebody. And so I looked around for indie publishers, and I had spoken with a person who had just worked with them with Stoney Creek. And so they were one of two places I actually queried at all. And I got a really nice prompt reply saying, send us 50 pages or something. And I thought, ooh, this feels good. And so every step of the way since then has just been amazing. And professionally operated. There's everything is clear what they're going to provide, what I'm doing, all of that. I feel really good about working with them. And I also think that it's consistent with what other people who have published with them say, that they feel really good about the product. The books look nice. They are well edited. They just do a good job. It's done, and yes, it is an independent, but they also have connections with the distributor through the Texas A&M Publishing Consortium, I believe the Texas Writing Consortium, and they so that's something that many independents can't offer. And also, it's really amazing to have a publicist assigned to guide me in terms of seeking opportunities to spread the word about this book. And that's made a big difference. So I couldn't be more pleased with working with Stoney Creek. I had worked with an indie before for the Jackson's Pond series. And the person who operated that was a solo, and he had several people to whom he outsourced work. And his main mission was to make good books, nice books that looked good, that told good stories, and that he thought were he liked. And he did a really fine job for me. But it was stripped down in terms of no assistance with marketing or publicity. I had to do anything that was done. I had to do myself, which is typical. That's not. It was not a surprise to me, but maybe it was a gift. He came to a point after four of those Jackson's Pond books and all the other projects for other people that he had committed to, and he said he believed he had done all he was going to do because he had done that as a retirement project of his own. And so he wasn't going to accept any more submissions. And so I thought, okay, time to go. And so that's how I happened to be at a point of that making decisions about what I was going to do next. And that's how I'm with Stoney Creek, and I'll stick with them as long as they stick with me.
Teddy, do you have any projects either in progress you're thinking about or maybe just noodling over?
Two of those three. Next publication with Stoney Creek is going to be another historically based novel, and it's called Far From Uncertain. And we'll get a cameo appearance from the Good Women briefly in that, but it's set in a combined way both in the past as well as in a frame of interaction between two characters in the year 2000. And so that I'm told will be be produced and out in the spring sometime from Stoney Creek. I have another Jackson's Pond story that I took to my workshop in Taos in July. And of course, it's only had its first outing, and who knows what it'll turn into now that I've revised it the first time. We'll see. But anyway, so yes, I have one coming and one I'm working on, and sure, something else will turn up. As long as I'm able, all right.
Teddy, unfortunately, we are near the end of our time for this episode. But before we leave, I wanted to ask you if our listeners wanted to connect with you, find out anything more about your work, what would be the best place or places for them to go?
I have a website. It's TJONES Writes, WRITES.net. Also, I'm on Facebook and occasionally on Instagram.
When does A Family of Good Women release?
September 9th.
Just
Not
around the
long.
corner? Nope.
Yeah, I can't wait to hold one.
Teddy, this has been a great chance to visit with you. I hope we can continue this conversation.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity to visit with you, Tom.